from the Squonk and the Horned Beast, and this chapter centers around the Horned Beast. And this chapter is called Madman Moon. Ready? Don't put this on YouTube. All right. Putnam's pores opened to welcome the cold air into his skin. Standing against the back wall, he shivered. The shackles on his wrists and neck rattled and cut his flesh. The brown fur on his legs and tail were soaked, adding to the miserable chill. He placed the palms of his hands flat on the damp stone wall of the cell to help maintain his balance. The bonds gripping his ankles made it nearly impossible for him to stand. The rocks embedded in the muddy floor stabbed at the soles of his feet. His head ached. Through a small barred opening in the wall, the moon pierced through the darkness of his despair. His arms grew into wings, breaking through his restraints in the walls of the cell. He flew through the ashen air, over the clouds, in search of daylight far away from the prison gloom. He was free in flight and found warmth from the golden rays of the sun. The heat reminded him of home. It reminded him of his mother. His village was glorious. He flew over a city made of gold, which was protected by lush green fields and massive forests filled with oaks, maples, and pines. Everything was surrounded by a golden gate. He then flew over a long bark house secluded in the woods near the city and became uneasy at the sight. Thwack! A stabbing pain blasted the back of his head. The base of his horns throbbed from the blow. A deep, scratchy badger voice growled, "Hey, freak, wake up!" Putnam's imaginary wings vanished as the darkness returned and he came crashing back down into his sodden cell. There was another strike to Putnam's head. He twirled around and lost his balance, slipping backwards into the stone wall. The fall didn't hurt because he was still focused on the stinging pain at the back of his skull. He was captured for being a freak a few months ago. He wished he had never left his home and the protection of his mother. He covered his face with his hands. Tears and blood spilled through his fingers and down his arms as the club hit him again. Thwack! The tip of his left horn flew off. The menacing voice screamed in Putnam's ear again. "Don't even think about escaping, you demon. Not even in your dreams." The voice was that of Wallace, a heavy-set lout of a guard who enjoyed torturing prisoners. He took pleasure in the authority he had over the prisoners, and he loved their blood staining his club. He was 6'4", at about 250 pounds, with a dark full beard except for a patch of white hair on his chin. Wallace turned, left the cell with a grunt, and shut the cage behind him. Putnam knew the only reason for his reprieve was the hunger in the fat guard's stomach. The brute's desire to eat often overtook his craving to torture prisoners. Unfortunately, Putnam knew a full Wallace was far more vicious and sadistic of a torturer than an empty one. Putnam glanced at the string wrapped around his wrist. He sobbed against the wet, slimy wall and fell into another dream as the harsh metal clank of the key in the lock sealed off any hope of escape. That's the first chapter.
Very good. It's supposed to be like a science fiction type of thing?
Not science fiction, it's more fantasy fiction.
Okay, okay.
Because I have a more rustic feel to the fiction that I write, not very technological or like the character, he's basically an outcast, and in the way I wrote it, I kind of start in the middle, and then I like writing nonlinear. I love Kurt Vonnegut, and he tends to write nonlinear, and that's where my major influence is. Maybe my brain is kind of scattered anyway. But I like kind of mixing it around, and then in the end, the puzzle comes together in the end. But I I allude to certain things like his mother, which is a character, and why, there was reasons why he left, and not to spoil it, but it's because he was an outcast at home as well, and so just part of his coming of age, he had to leave and find himself, and it didn't turn out right away too great because he ended up getting himself captured because he's a horned beast. And you mentioned that you saw, well, there's a demon on the cover. Well, again, you see a horned person, you think demon, but you don't judge a book by its cover.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
He's actually, he's an empathetic figure.
Yeah.
Nice.
And the Squonk, which if you can see in the moon, if you see him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And he's one of the creatures. He's a very ugly creature. But he's someone that befriends him, and a Squonk was a character that I think he was a character from Pennsylvania in the Hemlock Forest. He was believed to be a very sad character who cried all the time, and so I based this character on that, but I didn't want to make him that type of character. I kind of wanted to make him something that people don't expect. They see an ugly crying character, they don't, there's more to it than meets the eye. So, but they become close and they help each other out and they go on their little adventure and meet other crazy characters. And the spider actually is a little character too, if you notice the spider. And I picked a spider because it's a bug that people are frightened of and fearful of, and people don't realize how great they are actually for the environment and how they don't pass diseases like other bugs do, and but I wanted things that people that are afraid of or creatures that are misunderstood.
Yeah.
And so and I think people can identify with it because everyone's felt kind of like an outcast at one point or time or another. And so there's a little bit of me in the horned beast. So that's basically what that story's about, and it just kind of good young adult type of fantasy, and I do like fantasy as well. So, and I hope it's not, and I was trying to avoid any kind of formulaic type of fiction. I don't like any.
Well, that's true. Yeah, there's way too much stuff out there. You can tell what's going to happen.
Because the way it ended, I'm not going to say how it ends because I want you to read it. But I know some of the people who've read it. They're like, "Well, why did you have this happen? I expected this to happen." And I said, "Well, that's why." It's more realistic if things don't go the way you think they're going to go. So I hope you read it, and I hope did you have that? Did you?
Yeah, I anticipated.
Did I accomplish that goal?
Yeah, I anticipated one ending, and you, woo.
Okay.
So yeah, it was.
So.
Well, that's the best. Those are the best kind of stories, especially if you can go back to the plotline and say, "Oh, I see where it turned, and I missed the turn."
Yeah. So, and also, I was hoping if you could start. I'm not sure if I was able to accomplish this, but to start in the middle and read a chapter and bounce around, and still by the time you get to the end, maybe I don't know if that happened, but when I was initially writing it, I think that's because when I read a book called Catch-22 by Joseph Miller, you could start anywhere in that book because it's so out of order. So I kind of had that on. I don't think it's quite to that type of extent, but I think when I first initially was putting it together, I had that in my mind.